Jake Morrison stood at the edge of the massive arena, his boots firmly planted on the cold metal floor. The structure stretched out before him like a city made of fighting rings. Hundreds of different alien species filled the stands, their voices, creating a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. He had never seen anything like this place in his 15 years as a Navy SEAL. The arena belonged to the Galactic Combat Federation. Today was the start of their most important tournament. Every species in the galaxy sent their best fighters, here to prove who was strongest. Earth had received an invitation 3 months ago. And now, Jake was here to represent all of humanity. Admiral Lisa Brooks walked up beside him, her face serious. She was the woman who had convinced Earth's leaders to accept the challenge. "Look at them, Jake," she said, pointing to the nearest fighting ring. "Those are the champions of Zarian Prime." Jake watched as tall, crystal-like beings threw punches that shattered solid rock into dust. Their bodies looked like they were made of living diamonds, and each hit sounded like breaking glass. One of them picked up a steel beam and crushed it like paper between his hands. "Over there," Lisa continued, "those are the Fenra pack hunters." In another ring, wolf-like creatures moved so fast that Jake could barely see them. They had silver fur and eyes that glowed red in the arena lights. 6 of them attacked practice targets at the same time, working together like they shared one mind. Their claws left deep marks in metal that should have been impossible to cut. Jake counted at least 50 different species warming up for the tournament. Each one looked more dangerous than the last. The Goliath berserkers stood 12 feet tall, with skin like armor plating. The shadow dancers seemed to disappear and reappear at will, their bodies fading in and out like smoke. The plasma wielders shot beams of energy from their hands that melted everything they touched. "No human has ever made it past the first day," Lisa told him. "Most don't survive their first fight." Jake nodded but kept watching. This was what he did best. Before every mission, he studied the enemy, learned their strengths and weaknesses. He found ways to win when winning seemed impossible. That was why they called him the Ghost Walker. Back on Earth, he could move through enemy territory like he was invisible. A group of insect-like aliens caught his attention. They were called the Hive Queens, and each one controlled dozens of warrior drones through their minds. The drones moved in perfect formation, never making a mistake. When one queen pointed at a target, all her warriors attacked at exactly the same moment. "How long do I have before my first fight?" Jake asked. 2 hours, Lisa replied. "Jake, are you sure about this? These beings have been fighting for thousands of years. They have natural abilities that humans just don't have. Some of them can lift tanks. Others can move faster than bullets. A few can even control gravity." Jake smiled for the first time since arriving at the arena. "That's exactly why I'm going to win." Lisa looked confused. "I don't understand." "Been winning for so long that they've forgotten how to really fight?" Jake explained. "Look at those crystal beings. They just throw haymakers because nothing has ever been able to take their punch. Watch the wolf pack. They rely on speed and teamwork, but they all attack the same way every time." He pointed to different groups around the arena. The big guys use pure strength. The fast ones use pure speed. The energy shooters stand back and blast everything. They've gotten lazy because their natural gifts always worked before. Lisa was starting to understand, but humans don't have those natural gifts. "Exactly," Jake said. "We had to get creative. Had to learn how to fight smart instead of just fighting hard. Every human soldier knows how to adapt when the plan goes wrong. We know how to use the enemy's strength against them. We know how to find the weak spots that nobody else thinks to look for." A loud horn sounded across the arena. It was time for the opening ceremony. Jake watched as representatives from each species walked to the center of the main ring. They were announcing the fighters and explaining the rules. The tournament would last 5 days. Each fighter would face opponents from different species until only one remained. There were no weapons allowed, just natural abilities and hand-to-hand combat. The fights would continue until one fighter surrendered or could not continue. Jake listened as they called out the names of famous champions. Krex the Unbreakable had won the tournament 12 times. Vex the Steel Claw had never lost a fight. in 30 years. Queen Zara controlled the largest drone army in Hive history. Each name brought cheers from the alien crowds. Then they announced Earth's representative, Jake Morrison, human, representing the planet Earth. The arena fell silent for a moment, then exploded with laughter. Jake could hear betting odds being shouted in dozens of alien languages. Most of them were giving him less than a minute to survive his first fight. One voice rose above the others. It belonged to Krex, the Unbreakable, the massive champion from the Drakari species, a human. He roared with laughter. They sent us a soft skin. This'll be over before it begins. Jake studied Krex carefully. The alien stood 9 feet tall and was covered in natural armor that looked like dragon scales. His claws were as long as knives, and his muscles bulged like he was carved from stone. Everything about him screamed raw power and brutality, but Jake also noticed something else. Krex moved like someone who had never faced a real challenge.
I'm ready.
His stance was sloppy because he had never needed good technique. He telegraphed his attacks because nobody had ever been fast enough to dodge them. He was strong, but he was also predictable. The ceremony ended, and the fighters returned to their preparation areas. Jake found a quiet corner where he could think. Lisa joined him, along with Dr. Nina Walsh, Earth's expert on alien psychology. The good news is that most of them are underestimating you, Nina said. The bad news is that they have every right to. Jake, these beings have evolved for combat. Their entire species are built for fighting. Humans are built for thinking. Then I'll outthink them, Jake replied simply. It's not that easy, Nina continued. Take the Fenrari pack hunters. They can process information 50 times faster than humans. Their reaction time is measured in microseconds. How do you outthink something that thinks faster than you do? Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled again. Speed isn't everything. Sometimes the fastest car loses the race because the driver takes the wrong turn. Sometimes the smartest computer gives the wrong answer because it was asked the wrong question. He stood up and began stretching, preparing his body for the fights. Ahead, those pack hunters think fast, but they all think the same way. They've been using the same tactics for thousands of years because those tactics always worked. They've never had to develop new strategies. Lisa was beginning to see what Jake meant. So you're going to do something they've never seen before. Going to do a lot of things they've never seen before, Jake confirmed. Every fight will be different. Every technique will be something new. By the time they figure out how to counter one strategy, I'll already be using another one. A smaller horn sounded, announcing that the first day of fighting would begin in 1 hour. Jake's first opponent would be Vex the Steel Claw, one of the most feared fighters in the galaxy. The Steel Claw Raptors were known for their incredible speed and their claws that could cut through almost anything. You ready? Lisa asked. Jake looked out at the arena one more time. Thousands of alien warriors filled the stands, all waiting to see the human get torn apart. The betting pools had already written him off as a sure loser. Even his own species wasn't confident he would survive. But Jake Morrison had spent his entire career proving that impossible was just another word for difficult. He had completed missions that other soldiers said couldn't be done. He had survived situations that should have killed him. He had won battles against enemies that were bigger, stronger, and better equipped than him. Today would be no different. I'm ready, he said. The horn sounded and Jake walked toward the fighting ring. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor as thousands of alien eyes watched him move. The crowd was buzzing with excitement, but not the good kind. They were excited to see the human get destroyed. Vex the Steel Claw was already waiting in the ring. The Steel Claw Raptor stood 7 feet tall with a lean body built for speed. His skin was dark green with silver patterns that looked like lightning bolts. But the most dangerous parts were his claws. They were made of some kind of living metal that grew from his fingers like curved knives. Each claw was 2 feet long and sharp enough to cut through starship. Armor Jake climbed through the ropes and entered the ring. The surface under his feet was made of a material that felt like rubber but looked like stone. It was designed to absorb impact and prevent fighters from using the floor as a weapon. The ring was 50 feet across, giving them plenty of room to move. Ladies and gentlemen of the galaxy, the announcer's voice boomed across the arena. First match of the tournament. In the red corner, representing the Steelclaw Empire, 30 years undefeated, the lightning-fast Vex the Steelclaw. The crowd roared with approval. Vex raised his arms and his claws caught the light like polished swords. He moved in a circle around the ring, showing off his speed. Jake could barely track him with his eyes. And in the blue corner, representing the planet Earth, the human Jake Morrison. A few polite claps echoed through the arena, but most of the crowd was silent. Jake heard someone in the stands say something in an alien language that made others laugh. He didn't need a translator to know they were making jokes about how quickly he would lose. The referee was a floating robot with multiple eyes that could watch every angle of the fight. Fighters, the rules are simple. No weapons except natural abilities. Fight until one surrenders or cannot continue. Begin when you hear the signal. Jake took a deep breath and focused his mind. During his years as a SEAL, he had learned to slow down time in dangerous situations. His heart rate dropped. His breathing became steady. His mind became perfectly clear. Vex crouched low like a cat ready to pounce. His claws extended fully and started to glow with some kind of energy. Jake could see the confidence in the alien's eyes. This was going to be easy for him. The signal sounded. Vex moved faster than anything Jake had ever seen. The alien became a blur of green and silver as he crossed the ring in less than a second. His claws whistled through the air where Jake's head had been, but Jake was no longer there. Jake had rolled to the side at the exact moment Vex started moving. He had studied videos of Steelclaw fighters during his journey to the tournament. They always opened with the same attack. Straight-line charge followed by a diagonal slash aimed at the opponent's neck. It worked against every other species, because they tried to match the Steelclaw's speed or block the attack with strength. Jake did neither. He used Vex's incredible speed against him as Vex flew past. Unable to stop his momentum, Jake grabbed the alien's ankle and twisted. It was a move he had learned in basic training 20 years ago. The key was timing and leverage, not strength. Vex crashed to the ground hard, his claws scraping against the ring surface. The crowd went quiet. That wasn't supposed to happen. Vex rolled to his feet instantly, his reflexes almost too fast to see. But now, there was something different in his eyes. Confusion. No opponent had ever avoided his opening attack before. Lucky Vex hissed in Galactic Standard language. His voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. Jake said nothing. Just kept moving in a slow circle, staying light on his feet. He had learned long ago that talking during a fight was a waste of energy and concentration. Vex attacked again, this time with a series of quick slashes. His claws moved in patterns. That had been perfected over thousands of years of evolution. Left high, right low, left middle, right high. The sequence was designed to give the opponent no escape route. But Jake wasn't trying to escape. He was moving toward Vex, getting inside the alien's reach, where the long claws became a disadvantage instead of an advantage. Jake slipped past the first three attacks and grabbed Vex's wrist as the fourth claw came down, using the alien's own attacking motion. Jake spun Vex around and applied a joint lock that human police officers use to control suspects. The technique worked on human anatomy because it put pressure on specific points in the arm and shoulder. Jake had wondered if it would work on alien joints. It did. Vex cried out in pain as Jake bent his arm in a direction it wasn't designed to. Go. The Steelclaw tried to pull free, but the harder he pulled, the more it hurt. His other hand came around to slash at Jake, but Jake was positioned behind him where the claws couldn't reach. Surrender, Jake said quietly, applying just enough pressure to make his point. Never, Vex growled, but his voice was tight with pain. Jake increased the pressure slightly. Wasn't trying to break the alien's arm, just convince him that continuing the fight was pointless. In his years of combat experience, Jake had learned that the best way to win a fight was to make the other person realize they couldn't win. Vex struggled for another 30 seconds, trying different ways to escape the hold. But Jake had decades of training in ground fighting and joint manipulation. Every time Vex moved, Jake adjusted his position to maintain control. Finally, Vex tapped the ground with his free hand, the universal signal for surrender. Jake released the hold immediately and stepped back. Vex rolled away and got to his feet, rubbing his sore arm. The two fighters looked at each other across the ring. Then something unexpected happened. Vex walked over to Jake and bowed his head slightly. It was a gesture of respect that steel-claw raptors rarely showed to other species. "You fight strangely, human," Vex said. "But you fight well." Jake bowed back. "You're fast and strong." "I just found a different way to fight." The crowd was still, mostly silent, but Jake could see aliens in the stands, talking to each other with excited gestures. What they had just witnessed wasn't supposed to be possible. A human had defeated one of the galaxy's premier fighters without using any special abilities or advanced technology. Jake left the ring and walked back to his preparation area. Lisa and Nina were waiting for him with expressions of shock and amazement. "How did you do that?" Lisa asked. "Vex has never lost a fight. His species has been undefeated in single combat for 300 years. I didn't try to beat him at his own game," Jake explained. "I made him play my game instead." Nina was taking notes on her tablet. "The other species are going to start studying that fight. I'll try to figure out what you did so they can counter it." Jake smiled. "Good, let them study it. My next fight will be completely different." His second opponent was announced over the arena speakers. Thane the Mountain, a magma-forged warrior from the volcanic world of Infernus. Jake had watched Thane fight during the warm-up period. The alien stood 8 feet tall, and his body looked like it was carved from solid rock. His skin was black, with veins of red that glowed like lava. "The magma-forged are even tougher than the steel claws," Nina warned. "Their skin can withstand direct hits from plasma cannons. They're incredibly strong, and they feel almost no pain.
Ow.
Most fighters can't even hurt them, let alone defeat them." Jake nodded and started stretching again. He had 30 minutes before the next fight. Time enough to plan a completely different strategy. "What are you thinking?" Lisa asked. Jake watched Thane through the observation window. The magma-forged warrior was practicing by punching through steel barriers like they were made of paper. Each hit left glowing handprints in the metal. "I'm thinking about how water beats rock," Jake said. "Not by being harder, but by being patient." 20 minutes later, Jake was back in the ring facing an opponent who looked like a living mountain. Thane's glowing eyes stared down at him with complete confidence. The alien had probably never met anything he couldn't simply overpower. This time the crowd was paying more attention. Word of Jake's first victory had spread quickly through the arena. The betting odds were still heavily against him, but they weren't quite as extreme as before. The signal sounded, and Thane charged forward like a runaway truck. His massive fists came down where Jake had been standing, leaving cracks in the supposedly indestructible ring surface, but Jake was already moving, staying just out of reach of those devastating punches. He had no intention of trading blows with something that could punch through steel. Instead, he was going to make Thane chase him until the big alien wore himself out. It was going to be a long fight. But Jake Morrison was patient. He had all day. Jake kept moving around the ring as Thane charged after him like an angry bull. The magma-forged warrior was incredibly strong, but he was also incredibly slow. Each time his massive fists hit the ground, they left smoking craters in the ring surface. The heat from his body made the air shimmer like a desert mirage. "Stand still and fight," Thane growled, his voice sounding like rocks grinding together. Jake didn't answer. He was too busy staying alive. Thane's punches created shockwaves that Jake could feel in his bones even when they missed. One direct hit would end the fight instantly. But Jake had noticed something important during his study of magma-forged fighters. They had incredible power and endurance, but they had never learned to pace themselves because nothing had ever lasted long enough to tire them out. After 10 minutes of chasing Jake around the ring, Thane was starting to breathe heavily. The glowing veins in his rock-like skin were pulsing faster, and steam was rising from his body. Jake could see confusion in the alien's eyes. This wasn't how his fights usually went. Jake started changing his pattern, moving closer to Thane before dancing away again, He was like a boxer working against a heavy bag, except the heavy bag was trying to crush him. Each time Thane swung and missed. Jake landed a quick strike on the alien's joints and pressure points. The hits didn't hurt Thane much. His skin was too tough for that. But they were having an effect. Jake was targeting specific spots that he had identified during his observation period, places where even the magma forged had nerve clusters and blood vessels close to the surface. By the 20-minute mark, Thane was moving noticeably slower. The big alien had never been in a fight that lasted this long. Species won battles in the first few seconds through overwhelming force. They had never developed the kind of endurance needed for extended combat. Jake could see other aliens gathering around the ring to watch. Word was spreading through the arena that something unusual was happening. The human was somehow surviving against a magma-forged warrior, and that shouldn't be possible. Thane launched another massive punch that would have taken Jake's head off if it connected. But Jake was ready for it. He stepped inside the punch and drove his elbow into a specific spot just below Thane's ribcage. It was a technique called a liver shot in human boxing. And Jake had wondered if it would work on alien anatomy. Thane doubled over, gasping for breath. The hit had found a pressure point that even his thick skin couldn't protect. Jake immediately followed up with a series of quick strikes to the back of Thane's neck, targeting nerve clusters that would disrupt the alien's balance and coordination. Thane tried to straighten up and swing again, but his movements were unsteady now. The accumulated damage was finally having an effect. Jake had been chipping away at the mountain for half an hour, and now it was starting to crumble. Jake grabbed Thane's arm and used a judo throw to send the massive alien crashing to the ground. The ring shook from the impact and cracks spread. Out from where Thane landed, the magma-forged warrior tried to get up, but his legs wouldn't support him anymore. "I yield," Thane said quietly, tapping the ground with one massive hand. Jake stepped back and offered his hand to help Thane up. The alien stared at him for a moment, then accepted the help. When Thane was back on his feet, he placed one huge hand on Jake's shoulder. "You are small, human, but your spirit burns bright," Thane said with respect in his voice. "I have never been defeated in this way before." Jake nodded. "You're tough as a mountain. I just had to find a way to move the mountain." The crowd was definitely paying attention now. Jake could hear excited conversations in dozens of different languages as he left the ring. The impossible was happening. A human was not only surviving the tournament, he was winning his fights through methods that none of the alien species had ever seen before. Dr. Nina Walsh was waiting for him with a look of amazement on her face. "Jake, you're causing quite a stir-up in the stands. Representatives from at least 20 different species are trying to figure out how you're doing this." "What are they saying?" Jake asked, toweling off the sweat from his fight with Thane.
Out there.
Confused, Nina replied. "Most of them are convinced that humans must have some kind of hidden ability or secret technology. Can't understand how you're winning through pure technique." Admiral Brooks joined them with an update on Jake's next opponent. "You're fighting Queen Zara of the Hive Mind Collective. She'll have 6 warrior drones with her in the ring." Giga. Jake had been expecting this. The Hive Mind fights were always 7 against 1, but it was considered fair because the drones and the Queen shared a single consciousness. They moved together perfectly, attacked together perfectly, and thought together perfectly. No individual fighter had ever defeated a hive mind group. "Tell me about their tactics," Jake said. Nina pulled up videos on her tablet. "The drones always attack in coordinated waves while the Queen stays back and directs them. They share sensory information, so if one drone sees something, they all know about it instantly. Their coordination is mathematically perfect." Jake watched the videos carefully. The hive mind warriors moved like they were connected by invisible strings. When one moved left, another automatically moved right to cover the opening. When one attacked high, another attacked low, at exactly the same moment. It was like fighting a single opponent with 7 bodies. "What happens if something happens to the Queen?" Jake asked. "The drones become confused and slow," Nina explained. "But the Queen is always protected in the center of the formation. One has ever gotten close to her during a fight." Jake smiled. No one has ever tried what I'm going to try. An hour later, Jake was back in the ring, facing 7 opponents instead of 1. Queen Zara stood in the center of her formation, her insect-like body covered in beautiful patterns that seemed to shift and change color. She was smaller than her drones, but clearly more intelligent. Her compound eyes tracked every movement. Jake made. The 6 warrior drones surrounded her in a perfect hexagon. Each drone stood 6 feet tall with 4 arms ending in sharp claws. Their exoskeletons were dark green with silver highlights, and they moved with mechanical precision. Jake could see no individual personality in any of them. They were extensions of the Queen's will. "Begin," the referee announced. The drones attacked immediately in a wave pattern that should have been impossible to escape. 3 came from the left, 3 from the right, all timed so that Jake would be forced into the center where the Queen waited with her own razor-sharp claws. But Jake didn't try to escape the attack. Instead, he ran straight toward one of the drones and slid between its legs at the last second. The move put him inside the formation where the drones couldn't attack without risking harm to their queen. Queen Zara's eyes went wide with surprise. No opponent had ever willingly entered the center of the formation before. She raised her claws to strike, but Jake was already moving again. He grabbed Queen Zara around the waist and lifted her off the ground. But rather a wrestling hold that immobilized her arms and put her in a position where the drones couldn't reach him without going through her. The effect was immediate. All 6 drones froze in place, their coordination completely disrupted. They couldn't attack Jake without risking injury to their queen, but they also couldn't retreat because their programming demanded they protect her. "Clever, human, queen," Zara said, her voice like musical chimes. "But you cannot hold me forever." "I don't need to hold you forever," Jake replied. "I just need to hold you long enough." Jake adjusted his grip so that he had Queen Zara in a submission hold that would cause her pain if she struggled too hard. It was the same principle he had used against Vex, but adapted for the Queen's different anatomy. The drone started moving forward to help her, but stopped when she cried out from the pressure Jake was applying. "Oh, your drones can't help you without hurting you," Jake explained calmly. "And you can't escape without hurting yourself. The only way this ends is if you surrender." Queen Zara was silent for a long moment, her compound eyes studying Jake's face. Around them, her drones shifted nervously, but didn't dare approach. "Could you not fight to destroy?" she said finally. "You fight to win. There is a difference." "Yes," Jake agreed. "I don't want to hurt you or your drones. I just want to prove that humans belong in this tournament." Queen Zara made a sound that might have been laughter. "You have proven more than that, human. You have shown us a new way to think about combat. I yield." When Jake released her, Queen Zara stood and bowed deeply. Her drones immediately did the same, their perfect synchronization restored now that their queen was safe. "You have earned our respect," Queen Zara said. "We will remember this lesson." As Jake left the ring, he could see that something had changed in the arena. The alien spectators were no longer laughing or making jokes about the human fighter. They were watching him with serious expressions, trying to understand what they had witnessed. Jake Morrison had won 3 fights in ways that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about combat. And he was just getting started. Word of Jake's victories spread through the arena like wildfire. By the start of day 3, crowds of alien spectators were arriving early just to watch the human warm up. Species that had been enemies for centuries were sitting together in the stands united by their curiosity about this strange fighter from Earth. Jake could feel the change in atmosphere as he prepared for his biggest challenge yet. Today he would face Krex the Unbreakable, the tournament's defending champion for 12 straight years. The massive Drakari warrior had never lost a single fight in his entire career. Admiral Brooks brought Jake the latest intelligence reports about his opponent. Krex stands 9 feet tall and weighs over 600 pounds. His skin is like natural armor that can stop bullets. His claws can tear through starship hulls. And he's fast despite his size. Jake studied the videos of Krex's previous fights. Each one ended the same way. The Drakari champion would charge his opponent in a berserker rage, overwhelm them with pure aggression, and crush them within the first minute. No one had ever lasted long enough to tire him out or find a weakness. "What's his fighting style?" Jake asked. Dr. Nina Walsh pulled up more footage. Krex doesn't really have a style in the traditional sense. He just attacks with everything he has until his opponent stops moving. His species evolved on a death world where only the most savage predators survived. They fight by instinct, not technique. Jake watched Krex tear apart a Goliath berserker in less than 30 seconds. The champion's movements were brutal, but not precise. He wasted energy with wild swings and unnecessary roars. He fought like a wild animal because that's exactly what he was. He's never had to develop real fighting skills, Jake realized. He's so naturally strong and tough that he's never needed to learn proper technique. That's true, Nina agreed. But Jake, his natural advantages are so overwhelming that technique might not matter. He's literally strong enough to tear you in half. Jake nodded. He wasn't underestimating the danger. Krex was the most physically powerful opponent he had ever faced. But Jake had also noticed something in the videos that gave him hope. Krex always fought the same way because that way had always worked. He had no experience adapting to unexpected situations. As Jake walked toward the ring, he could see that this fight was drawing more attention than any other match in the tournament's history. Representatives from dozens of species had abandoned their own preparation to watch. Even the other remaining contestants were gathering ringside. Krex was already waiting in the ring, pacing back and forth like a caged beast. His scales were dark red with black stripes that made him look even more intimidating. His claws were longer than Jake's forearms, and his eyes glowed with predatory hunger. When he saw Jake approaching, he threw back his head and roared loud, enough to make the entire arena shake. Finally, Krex snarled as Jake climbed through the ropes. "I was getting bored waiting for you, little human. This will be over quickly." Jake said nothing. He was focused on his breathing and his mental preparation. He had studied dozens of hours of footage and identified several patterns in Krex's fighting style. The champion was powerful, but predictable. He was aggressive, but not patient. And most importantly, he had never faced an opponent who refused to fight on his terms. The referee's voice echoed through the arena. Championship semifinal. Krex, the Unbreakable versus Jake Morrison. Fighters ready? Yes. Krex crouched low and extended his claws fully. Saliva dripped from his fanged mouth as he prepared for the kill. The crowd was on its feet, expecting to see the human torn apart within seconds. Jake took a deep breath and centered himself. This was just another mission. Another impossible situation that required creative thinking and perfect execution. He had survived worse odds before. Begin. Krex exploded forward with a speed that seemed impossible for something so large. His claws whistled through the air in a pattern designed to shred everything in their path. The attack was so fast and violent that most opponents never even saw it coming. But Jake wasn't there when the claws arrived. He had rolled away at the last possible second, using Krex's own momentum to carry the champion past him. As Krex thundered by, Jake struck quickly at the back of the alien's knee with a precise kick that targeted nerve clusters. Krex stumbled, but didn't fall. He spun around with another roar and charged again, even more furious than before. This time Jake sidestepped and struck at Krex's elbow as the claws swept past. Then he immediately moved away before Krex could grab him. The pattern continued for several minutes. Krex would attack with devastating force. Jake would avoid the attack and strike back at vulnerable spots, then move away before Krex could retaliate. Each individual hit from Jake was small, but they were accumulating damage in places that even Krex's armor couldn't fully protect. The champion was getting frustrated. He had never been in a fight that lasted this long before. His opponents usually stood still and tried to match his strength, which made them easy targets. Jake was doing something completely different, and Krex didn't know how to adapt. "Stop running and fight me," Krex bellowed, breathing heavily now. Jake finally spoke. "I am fighting you. I'm just not fighting stupid." That comment made Krex even angrier. He launched into a wild series of attacks that had no pattern or strategy, just pure rage. But anger made him sloppy, and sloppiness created openings that Jake could exploit. Jake slipped inside one of Crex's wild swings and drove his elbow into the champion's ribs with all his strength. The hit found a gap between armor plates that Jake had identified during his study. Crex grunted in pain and surprise. It was the first time in years that anyone had actually hurt him. The crowd gasped. Many of the alien spectators had never seen Crex take a solid hit before, let alone show signs of pain. Crex grabbed for Jake with both hands, trying to catch him in a bear hug that would crush every bone in his body. But Jake dropped low and swept Crex's legs, using a judo technique that worked regardless of size or strength. The key was timing and leverage, not power. Crex crashed to the ground with a thunderous impact that cracked the ring's surface. For a moment he lay stunned, not believing what had just happened. No one had ever knocked him down before. Jake didn't waste the opportunity. He moved in quickly and applied a chokehold that cut off blood flow to Crex's brain. It was a technique that worked on any creature with a circulatory system, regardless of how tough their skin was. Crex thrashed wildly, trying to throw Jake off, but the human held on like he was riding a bucking bull. Jake had trained for situations like this, where he needed to maintain control of a much larger and stronger opponent. The secret was staying calm and adjusting his position as needed. After 30 seconds, Crex's struggles started to weaken. The lack of blood to his brain was making him dizzy and disoriented. He had incredible physical strength, but he couldn't fight the laws of biology. "Yield," Jake said quietly. "You're going unconscious whether you surrender or not. But if you yield now, you wake up with your dignity intact." Crex fought the hold for another few seconds, then tapped the ground with one massive claw. Jake immediately released the chokehold and moved away. Crex lay on the ground for a moment, breathing heavily and staring at the ceiling. Then he slowly sat up and looked at Jake with something that might have been respect. "How?" Crex asked simply. "You're strong and fast and tough," Jake replied. "But you've never learned to really fight. You've just been overpowering everyone with natural gifts." Crex stood up slowly, his legs still unsteady. Around them, the arena was completely silent. The impossible had happened again. The human had defeated the galaxy's greatest champion using nothing but skill and strategy. "You have beaten me fairly," Crex said formally. "I acknowledge your superiority." But then something unprecedented happened. Other fighters started climbing into the ring. First came Vex the Steel Claw, then Thane the Mountain, then Queen Zara with her drones. Soon the ring was filled with every contestant that Jake had defeated, plus many others who had been eliminated by different opponents, one by one. They all lowered their heads in a gesture of respect that transcended species barriers. They weren't bowing to a conqueror or a superior being. They were acknowledging someone who had shown them a completely new way to think about combat and competition. Jake Morrison had made it to the tournament finals, but more importantly, he had earned something that no human had ever possessed before: the genuine respect of the galaxy's greatest warriors. The final day of the tournament arrived with an atmosphere unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The arena was packed beyond capacity as representatives from hundreds of worlds came to witness what many were calling the most important combat event in galactic history. Human had reached the finals, and nobody knew what that meant for the future. Jake spent the morning in quiet preparation, but his mind was troubled by what Admiral Brooks had told him about his final opponent. Perfect Weapon wasn't a natural being at all. It was an artificial creation designed by the galaxy's greatest scientists to be the ultimate fighter. They took DNA samples from every species in the Federation. Dr. Nina Walsh explained as she showed Jake the classified files. Then they combined the best traits from each one into a single being. It has Drakari strength, Fenrari speed, Zarian durability, steel claw reflexes, and the tactical processing power of a hive mind queen. Jake studied the images of his opponent. The perfect weapon looked humanoid, but was clearly something else entirely. Its body seemed to shift and change depending on what abilities it needed to use. One moment it might have the crystalline skin of a Zarian. The next moment, the flowing movements of a shadow dancer. It was created specifically to win this tournament. Nina continued, "The Federation wanted to prove that artificial enhancement was superior to natural evolution. They programmed it with every fighting technique, from every species in the galaxy. Every technique except human ones, Jake pointed out. That's right, Nina agreed. When they designed it 5 years ago, humans weren't considered worth studying. We had never made it past the first day of competition. Jake smiled grimly. Sometimes being underestimated was an advantage. As he walked toward the ring for the final match, Jake could see that the entire arena had changed. Aliens who had been enemies for generations were sitting together, united by their curiosity about what was happening. Betting pools had stopped taking wagers because nobody knew how to calculate odds for this fight. The perfect weapon was already waiting in the ring. Jake had to admit it was an impressive sight. The artificial being stood exactly 7 feet tall, with perfect proportions and movements that flowed like water. Its skin seemed to be made of living metal that reflected the arena lights in beautiful patterns. When Jake climbed through the ropes, the perfect weapon turned to study him with eyes that held no emotion at all. It was analyzing him the way a computer might analyze data, looking for weaknesses and calculating attack strategies. Human Jake Morrison, the perfect weapon, said in a voice that sounded like several different species speaking at once. I have studied your previous matches. Your techniques are primitive but effective against unprepared opponents. I am prepared. He was too busy observing his opponent's movements and posture. The perfect weapon stood with perfect balance and perfect readiness, but there was something artificial about its stance. It looked like someone trying to use every fighting style at once instead of choosing the right one for the situation. The referee announced the final match to thunderous applause from the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen of the galaxy, the championship. Final, the perfect weapon versus Jake Morrison of Earth. As the signal to begin echoed through the arena, Jake noticed something important. The perfect weapon didn't move immediately. It was still processing, still analyzing, still trying to decide which of its many abilities to use first. It had been programmed with too many options and couldn't choose quickly between them. Jake didn't have that problem. He had one fighting style that he had refined through years of real combat experience. He attacked immediately, using the perfect weapon's hesitation against it. The artificial being reacted with Fenrari speed, but its counterattack used Drakari power techniques that were too slow for its current speed. The mismatch between abilities created an opening that Jake exploited with a quick strike to what he hoped was a vulnerable joint. The perfect weapon adapted instantly, shifting its skin to Zarian crystal hardness and changing its stance to a steel claw combat position. But again, the combination was wrong. Crystal skin was heavy and affected balance, making the quick steel claw movements clumsy and predictable. Jake realized what was happening. The perfect weapon had been programmed with every fighting technique in the galaxy, but those techniques had all been developed by species that relied on their natural advantages. Each technique was designed to work with specific physical traits and against specific types of opponents. The perfect weapon was trying to use abilities that were meant to work together with traits it only had temporarily. It was like trying to drive a car with airplane controls or swim using techniques meant for flying. For the next 10 minutes, Jake systematically exploited this fundamental flaw. Every time the perfect weapon switched to a new set of abilities, there was a brief moment where its fighting style didn't match its current physical state. Jake struck during those moments, accumulating damage while avoiding the artificial being's powerful but poorly coordinated attacks. The crowd watched in fascination as the fight developed. They were seeing something that shouldn't be possible. The perfect weapon had every advantage, every ability, every technique. But Jake was winning through pure tactical thinking and adaptability. You fight strangely, the perfect weapon said as it shifted from Shadow Dancer phase abilities to hive mind coordination protocols. My analysis suggests you should have been defeated already. Your analysis is based on how everyone else fights, Jake replied, avoiding a combination attack that mixed 3 different species techniques incorrectly. But I don't fight like everyone else. Jake pressed his advantage, forcing the perfect weapon to keep switching abilities faster and faster. Each change created new mismatches between form and function that Jake could exploit. The artificial being was becoming confused by its own versatility. Finally, Jake saw the opening he had been waiting for. The perfect weapon tried to use Drakari. Berserker rage while maintaining Fenrari speed and Zarian durability, all at the same time. The combination overloaded its systems and created a moment of complete vulnerability. Jake moved in with a technique that didn't exist in any galactic database. It was a combination of moves he had learned from different human martial arts, adapted for his own fighting style, and modified based on everything he had learned during the tournament. It was uniquely human in its creativity and unpredictability. The strike hit the perfect weapon in a spot where 3 different types of armor overlapped incorrectly, creating a weak point that shouldn't have existed. The artificial being staggered and fell to one knee, its perfect coordination finally broken. "I yield," the perfect weapon said simply. "You have demonstrated combat superiority through methods not present in my programming." Jake stepped back and offered his hand to help his opponent up. The perfect weapon stared at the gesture for a moment, then accepted the help. As it stood, something changed in its artificial features. For the first time, it looked almost curious instead of just analytical. "How did you defeat me?" it asked. "I possessed every advantage." "You had every ability," Jake corrected. "But abilities are just tools. What matters is how you use them together and when you choose to use them. You were trying to be perfect at everything instead of being effective at what the situation required." Arena erupted in cheers as Jake was declared the tournament champion. But the real celebration was happening among the alien fighters themselves. They were gathered in small groups discussing what they had witnessed and what it meant for their understanding of combat. Admiral Brooks and Dr. Walsh reached Jake first, their faces showing amazement and pride. "You did it," Lisa said. "Actually won the whole thing." "More than that," Nina added. "You've changed how everyone here thinks about fighting. Look around." Jake looked and saw something remarkable. Species that had been enemies were sharing fighting techniques. Who had never spoken to each other were demonstrating moves and discussing strategy. The tournament had ended, but the real learning was just beginning. Over the following days, Jake found himself surrounded by alien fighters who wanted to understand human combat philosophy. They weren't interested in copying his techniques exactly. They wanted to learn the principles behind them, how to adapt in real time, how to turn disadvantages into advantages, how to think creatively under pressure. "You have given us a great gift," Queen Zara told him during the closing ceremony. "You have shown us that true strength comes not from what we are born with, but from what we choose to do with our gifts." Jake Morrison returned to Earth as more than just a tournament champion. He had become the galaxy's first human combat instructor, and requests for training were coming in from dozens of worlds. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through superior technology or genetic advantages, but through the most human trait of all, the ability to find a way to win when winning seemed impossible.